To start our painting, we're going to use just a basic beginning palette. You'll see that I have a jar there for thinner for cleaning the brush, and then I have a little jar for linseed oil that we use, and or any other medium that you like to use. The palette of colors that we're going to use is a very basic beginning starting palette. We can add to that later. Along the top of the palette, you'll see that there are some raw colors right out of the tube. Those particular colors are laid out there, and those are source colors. And those colors are burnt umber, alizarin crimson, permanent blue, cerulean blue, phthalo blue, cadmium yellow light, and titanium white. Now you'll notice that beside burnt umber, for instance, there's BU, alizarin crimson, there's AC. This is for note-taking purposes. It makes it much easier to take notes when we just use the first initials of some of those colors. Now permanent blue, however, I couldn't use PB because there's a Prussian blue, so I use PEB. Cerulean blue, I use CEB because there's a cobalt blue, and therefore CB might be interpreted as cobalt blue. So this is the way that you label your colors for taking notes. And that's the raw colors. Now down below the raw colors, you'll notice that there are piles of white, piles of color mixed with white. And you'll see that there are 5 piles there. And let's look at those for a moment. Here's a nice view showing the colors right out of the tube along the top, and then the 5 mixtures. Now the 5 mixtures from left to right are white plus permanent blue, white plus cerulean blue, white plus alizarin crimson. And notice, by the way, when you write white plus permanent blue out, notice how much room it takes, but with the initials it takes very little room on your notes. And so on your notes you would just write WT plus PEB and then put a swatch of that color next to it, and you would then be able to see that color and have lots more room for taking notes. Now, those are the first 3 colors. This one is cadmium yellow light and mixed with white, and you'll notice it's white plus CYL. Now cadmium yellow light will vary from manufacturer to manufacturer, and so if yours does not match this one exactly, don't be alarmed, because it still will work. That's white plus cadmium yellow light. This color is really an interesting one. It's 2 parts of burnt umber plus 1 part of phthalo blue. 2 burnt umber plus 1 part of phthalo blue. Now it's a very dark color. It's a blackish green. Burnt umber, being in the orange family, has enough yellow in it that it creates green. Now dark colors are so dark that you cannot see the color. They absorb the light rays. So when you have dark colors, you have to scrape it on the palette like that. And notice the beautiful, lovely, soft green that occurs when you have 2 parts of burnt umber and 1 part of phthalo blue mixed together. And so that's our basic palette, the colors along the top, the raw colors from the tube, and the intentional mixtures that we created by mixing these colors to an intended value. And these colors, these intentionals, when mixed together on the canvas, create the most beautiful array of secondaries and accidentals. And that's what really makes the painting. So now let's think about going back to our exercises, and we'll start with calm water. And I'm going to start with the filbert bristle brush. The roundness of the filbert bristle brush and the stiffness of the bristles allows us to push a lot of paint around. First thing we want to do is apply the local color, the underneath color of the water, before applying any of the surface effects over it. So let's go down to the palette, and I'll show you the first mixture. I'm going to take a little bit of the ultramarine blue, or the permanent blue mix. You know, permanent blue is the lighter variety of ultramarine blue. The permanent blue is a warm blue. It has red in it, and so does the ultramarine blue, because basically permanent blue is made from ultramarine dye. Now I'm going to take that number 1 mix there, the permanent blue, and then I'm going to take a little alizarin crimson mix and put with it. This will give us kind of a soft purple, just a nice soft grade purple. And we'll bring that up and we'll just start painting this purple right across here as some of the underbase of the water. Go down and get some more paint. In some areas you use a little more blue, other areas you use a little less blue. You add a little more of the alizarin, but I'm painting in the basic undercolor of the water. And we just keep covering until we get the area kind of covered with this soft gray purple. Now we're going to darken some of that and we're going to lighten some of that in just a little while. Now we wash our brush and we clean it with the thinner, but we don't want to leave a lot of thinner in the brush, and so I wipe it very clean. If we thin our paints with thinner, we wash away all of the bonding agents. Now I'm using a little of the cerulean mix, the second mixture, and we're going to take that up into the sky. And I just start applying that in an area here that would represent the sky. We put quite a bit of color on. Now, remember earlier I'd said that if you're painting calm water, maybe a sailboat becalmed would make a nice little scene. Well, we will paint a scene with a rock instead of a sailboat. And this will represent the sky right here. Now you just have to keep loading the brush. And I'm going to add a little more white to it here, just to create a little foggy effect, just picking up some white. And I'm just kind of blocking it in loosely. We'll do a little blending in a little while. A little more white, just here and there. You have to be very cautious about pure white. It can make the painting chalky. And having wiped the brush, and since this is going to be kind of a foggy, misty scene, I'm going to just break the color and pull these two colors, the sky and the basic undertone for the water, together so that there's a very soft horizon, if any, just very soft and misty graduation. Notice the colors coming together there. And we get a soft blend. And that's what we want. Now that's the foundation, that's the basis for this study. You have to set the mood and all the undercolor for any scene in a seascape. And now we have the scene set. We have the soft misty sky fading down into the blue of the water, and we'll alter some of these blues in just a moment. First, however, we want to use this little hake brush. And this little hake brush is a very soft brush, and we use it for blending. It's basically a watercolor wash brush, but we oil painters use it for blending. Come in and take a close look at it. You can see that it's a very soft brush. It is used basically for blending, but we can use it also for grasses and things of that sort. Here I'm just softly going over it. And notice the brush is just barely touching the canvas. I'm not going in a long horizontal stroke. I'm moving the brush in different directions, barely touching it with the bristles. Very delicately. Just touching the edges. And we do that all over the painting just to get a nice, soft, smooth finish. Now we're ready to come in and start changing some of the color of the water, and we'll start by also putting a few little rocks in to create the foggy, misty scene. Now we change into this small sable. It's a pure red sable, and it's in the bright style, and you can see that it's very small. This is about ½ inch wide here at the ferrule, but it's a very soft brush, and we'll use it for detail. We'll use it for painting in the rocks, and I'll also use it for changing some of the color in the water and creating some of the texture of the water. For the rocks, the basic color, we're going to take a little burnt umber and a little bit of alizarin crimson. And it's approximately, twice as much burnt umber as alizarin, and then just a little bit more burnt umber. And this will give us a nice mixture for the rocks. Make sure that the mixture is fairly well mixed, but not thoroughly mixed to where we lose the vibrance of the color. And remember, this is supposed to be a very soft, foggy, quiet, calm water sketch, and so I put some of this color up here. Now, using that burnt umber and alizarin, I'll create then the darkness of a rock form. Bring it down to where it would be sitting in the water, and then allowing the brush to pick up, wiping your brush constantly, allowing the brush to pick up some of the wet undercolor of the background. You come back in here and you paint a rock that's farther back. It's more in the distance. In order to create the feeling of depth and aerial perspective, we allow the background color to blend into and mix into this forward color, and the rock becomes a little more distant. Always thinking about the fact that in order to create distance and make something recede to the distance, put a touch of the color that's behind it in it, and it will recede to the distance. Now, the more darkness I put in here, the more forward the rock will come. And we can make the outline shape of the rock with the darkness on the left, and I'll put a tiny bit of darkness back there, wipe my brush, and then softly blend it in, because also in the background and in farther distant areas you lose detail. Now we've just plopped in a couple of rocks, and we're going to then come in and change some of the water. And to do that, I'm going to use a little white and a little bit of cadmium yellow light for the first time, a mixture. That's your number 4 mixture, your cadmium yellow light and white. And I'm just going to take that and lighten it just a tiny bit with white. We're going to use that to start creating some distant water effects. And since this is a very calm scene, before we finish our rocks, now's the time to put in just a suggestion using this color of some of the little soft, flat horizon foam that may be out in the distance, and we'll use this yellow and white. Then I'm going to take the cerulean mix in white and put some of that in too. But notice how those horizontal lines already establish a surface. Now, using a little of the light blue with the cerulean mix, I can pull in just a feeling of a change in color in the water. Very soft, placid scene. And continuing with that same yellow and white and intermingling it with the blue and white, just putting a little suggestion of the foam around the base of this rock. Now notice that it goes up into the rock, and we do this before finishing our rock. Pulling this light in. The light will be coming from the right in this painting, and so there's a little bit more light on the foam, even in the distance here. So we'll establish that. Once we have this in, we're ready to start pulling in some of the feeling of color change in the water. So just play with that and let the foam just flow. Now on the sunny side of the rock, we use the yellow. And on the shadowed side, I use the lighter blue, the cerulean blue mix with a little bit of white added to it. And I just simply draw it in. And notice there's a change. And this is indicating just a little slight swell on the rock. Now it's time to change some of the color in the water. I'm taking pure cerulean blue and just a little bit of pure cadmium yellow light. Those are the pure tube colors that we were talking about. And I make kind of an emerald green with that color, and we're going to apply that into the water. And I'm going to put that just right in here on this sunny side in little short U-shaped strokes. Keep them loose and small and let them flow down towards the lower right portion of the scene. Put a touch of them just up into this water between the rocks, just for a touch of color, and a little streak right in there. Now I'm going to take a little of that light mixture we used of the number 2 cerulean mix and add to that emerald green, and we're going to lighten the watercolor just a little. And we'll put some of that right here. And we'll lighten it just a little bit. And this gives the indication that there's a swell up against the rock, but yet it's still very placid and peaceful water. Intermingle some of that down here. And then there's one other color to put into this before we start detail. And that's the burnt umber and lizard mix that we used on the rock. And we lighten it a little bit with our number 2 mix, just to get a little soft, kind of a grayed purple. And we want to apply some of that just right here, down in the foreground, so that we get just a soft, kind of a reflection of the rock. Notice that it's still little, short, broken, U-shaped strokes, because it's calm water, and so these represent just little ripples. Put a little touch of it right in here, but not much. Now we have the beginnings of a little scene. We've done all of the work, the hard work, the foundation work. Now it's time to have some fun by putting some details in. And what we'll do is, we'll come in here and we'll develop then the feeling of the water. This is calm water. This is rather flat water out here in the distance. And as it comes up to the rocks, it starts to move just a little bit because of the surge of the water. And we have a little slight swell. And this little slight swell is just up against the rock. And so our direction of stroke will have to be down this way and down this way. And so with a dry brush, we'll do that. So I use a dry brush, a clean dry brush, and I just start making little sideways strokes in the direction of the flow of the water. Here I'm moving down this way, here I'm moving down this way, but in little short strokes. And I'm letting the color work into one another. All of these different colors just kind of merge. Little short strokes, but now don't make them individual fingernails by making them too U-shaped. Little short strokes. We're just simply blending and fusing and stitching together some of these colors in the water. That's about it. Down here I head this way. I just change direction on the brush. And then I start back down. The rock almost is the dividing point of the little swell. And that should do it. The next step is to smooth this with a hake brush, and then we'll come in with our detail. And as we did with the sky, we'll just barely touch the hake brush on this scene. Stay away from the rocks, and we'll just soften it gently. Don't lose everything and don't lose the direction, but we're fusing the color together very softly. And now that we've softened this, we're ready to start putting in some detail. So we'll take the small brush and we'll come down to the palette and pick up some detail colors. And we'll start with number 2 color, that's cerulean blue and white, and we're going to add a little bit of white to it in order to lighten it. And that's going to be the first color. Then we'll put in some pink. But first of all, let's take this and start some detail. Now the type of detail that we want to paint are little surface effects, and they again are very similar to the line pattern that we made earlier. You'll notice they're little U-shaped strokes, but they're tied together. Just a few of them gives it water direction. And we come over to the left side of the rock and paint in a few to show that there's movement going downhill towards the left. Just slight little strokes to show direction of water movement. You have to keep loading your brush, and we'll put a few out here. And don't worry about overlapping the rock, because we'll come in and put detail on the rock in a little while. This is very calm water, and you have to first of all set the base, all of the local color or color of the object, and the color within the water, and then we come in and we apply these details and surface effects all over them. So just here and there with this cerulean blue and white, and I thin my paint just a little bit so that it will ride on top of the wet paint. Now, we're ready to change colors again. And this time I'm going to take a little white and a little of the alizarin mix, number 3, and just lighten it a little bit. We still want a little bit of the pink glow in the color, but we want to lighten it just a little bit. And we'll put just a little bit of this pink in the water and weave it in with that cerulean mix. Just a little bit of a touch of a warm glow. Even though it's a cool red, alizarin has blue in it, we still are making a little feeling of warmth in the water by adding red next to the blue, even though it's a cool red. So there's a little bit of a hint of pink in the water also. Not very much. Now we're going to put some alizarin in the sky, so this will be a repeat of color in the sky. It's a very soft color. Just here and there. Spot your color around the canvas so that it isn't a hot spot, just one place. Move your color and repeat it. Now notice how the interweaving of the alizarin with the cerulean kind of gives it a nice warm effect. Now we're taking our number 4 mix and some white, and we're going to use that to paint some sunlight. We're lightening it just a little bit with some white. And we start applying some light color on the sunlight side of that rock, just to give the indication of brightness. Now let this color fade into the wet paint, but allow it to be very strong right next to the rock. And right here is another area that we want to put just a little brightness. Notice how that draws the eye to this light area. Now I'm going to take some more of that number 3 alizarin, and we're going to start putting a little color in the sky. And just spotting that alizarin here and there, very softly, we get a hint of a repeat of color that we've used down in the water. You always want to repeat your color. And just blend it in softly so that it blends and blurs into that background. Wipe your brush dry and just softly blend it so that it becomes misty. Remember, this is a foggy, misty scene. And now we've created just a very simple little scene. It's just an exercise to give us the feeling of calm water. Notice that there's the movement of the water there and the movement of the water there, and very peaceful, calm water out there. But in order to bring it into a complete little scene, as a starter, we're going to just put a little highlights and details on the rock and a little bit more surf down in this area. And to create a little sunlight glow for the rock, we're going to take our cadmium yellow light and a tiny speck of alizarin crimson. Cad yellow light pure and a speck of alizarin crimson pure. Now alizarin crimson is very strong. This gives us a nice soft orange, and we're going to use that on the rock. And since this is not a bright sunlight scene, we'll just indicate a little warmth on the rock on the right side. Just a little bit. And maybe a little stretch of warmth down there. Look at that divide the rock. And I'm going to put a little white in the color and move to the rock in the distance. And we'll just indicate a little bit of light striking this rock. Now we let it softly blend in. We wipe our brush again. And we let it softly blend into the background color so that it's not so hard-edged. And for the shadow side of the rock, I'm taking a little of this #1 mix, which was white and permanent blue, and a speck, tiny speck, of your alizarin crimson, and it makes a nice, rich blue-purple. A blue-purple is a violet, a red-purple is an orchid, and when you see just purple, then that's purple, and you see neither the red nor the blue. And so that's a nice little soft in-between purple. And we place just a little of this purple on the shadow side. Just a tiny bit. And here and there we add a little more of the blue. And this keeps it soft and misty. And there's where we paint over the area that we painted before with our water. And then you add just a little bit of that #3, the alizarin mix, just to the tops of those areas. And let's put a little bit right here just to break that. And with that lighter mix, we just come out and put indications of anatomy in the shadow of the rocks. You know, you need to paint it within the shadows too. So that back rock has a little bit of definition also. Another little highlight right here, just to lighten a bit. A little dark, and then some highlights in the water, and we'll be in business. Since we want this rock to draw the attention, we put just a little tiny bit at the top of a mix of your cadmium yellow light and your alizarin mix, your #3 and your #4 mix. And notice how that draws the eye to this area. This is not a dramatic bright sunlight scene, but we draw the eye to that particular rock. We put none of it on this rock back here because we want that to remain in the distance. Now we need to put some dark right in here in the shadows of this rock. Burnt umber and ultramarine blue and permanent blue make a beautiful black. Permanent blue is ultramarine blue dye, and so this makes a black. If I want it to be more blue, I can add a bluish black and add more blue. If I want it to be warmer black, I can add more umber. I want this to be just a soft black we're going to put in the shadows. Black is the absence of light and the absence of color. And so we just spot some just like that. And now, using a dry and cleaned brush, I come in and just allow that to blend a little bit. And this creates a depth to the rock, gives it a little heavy feeling at the base, gives a little foundation. And we don't do any of this to the back rock, just this rock. And using color #1, that permanent blue mix, we come in and we spot a little bit of water that's falling from the rock, little crevices in the rock. Put a highlight in there in a moment. Just a little bit out there, but some holes in the water too. Don't be afraid to paint a hole or two in the water. And the combination of these colors attracts the eye. Foam has little holes in it, so we paint a few little holes in the foam. Now we'll put a few little highlights in, and that'll take care of a very soft little exercise. And right here where the water is pouring back from the rock, we put a couple of little taps of light with the cerulean blue mix. And then we take the tiniest speck of pure white and just touch it, just here and there along the base. And look at the white give it life. You have to be very cautious about overusing pure white because it will destroy the color. It'll make everything appear chalky, but when used properly, white can excite color. And we put just a few more out here. We don't want too many because we don't want to attract too much attention, but just a few little highlights. Now that brings the little exercise up to where it could be called completed. But basically, let's go back in and put a couple of little indications of seagulls and birds here. It's always nice to have a little life form in the painting, and to do that we'll use a very small brush. And as you can see, this is a very tiny round brush, and I loaded with just a little bit of white, and we're only going to make the indication of seagulls. And we take our brush and we just make a little line for one wing and a little indication for another, and make one wing thicker than the other, and you can see there's a little seagull above that rock. And let's make one more just as a little partner, and it gives us the indication that there's another little seagull. And so that brings this little exercise up to where we would consider it a final. There's a lot that could be done to it. We could make a larger painting of it. As a matter of fact, I have a larger painting that was created using the same techniques that we used in this little exercise. I'll put it up on the screen, and you can see it. I'll point out a few things about it. You'll see the relationship between this exercise and the larger painting. And I'll leave it up on the screen for a while after pointing out some things so that you can study it a bit. I hope you've enjoyed this exercise. It's a fun little soft, misty scene. This is the painting, and it's a 16 by 20. And it's a painting that was made from the central coast of California, looking from one of the cliffs down over the rocks and onto the water. As you can see, the horizon is very misty, just like the exercise. Notice the seagull and the glow on the rocks. And there is no hard-edged horizon line. It just softly vanishes into the soft sky, just like we did on the exercise. Detail in these rocks shows and is painted just the same as the others, except that the light in this particular painting is coming from the left, and the light in the other exercise was coming from the right. Detail around the rocks, foam pouring from the larger rocks out in the water. As far as the coastal rocks, there's a little bit of a blue, light pale cerulean blue, that shows as agitated water around the surface rocks. Notice how the brush strokes just suggest rock forms without going in and drawing everything very tightly. And again, here's the overall composition of this painting.